Welcome to Current Day BBC, folks, where a professional comedian and creator of multiple BBC shows funded by the British taxpayer can now make active death threats on social media without consequence or cancellation, as long as the perpetrator possesses darker melanin and the victim is seen as a member of the oppressor class in the leftist worldview. And no, I'm not talking about phony fakey death threats or just some comment taken out of context in bad faith for the purposes of tribal gotchas. I mean an actual bona fide death threat of murder who promises to be at a fellow comedian's doorstep and who brags that he's willing to go to prison with his head held high whilst, quote, her family sits at the cemetery. Because that's exactly what this Dane Baptiste fella said last week toward a nameless female comedian who he asserts is a Zionist and a stalker of some sort. Now, far be it from me to want to engage in or promote current day cancel culture, but I would have thought that if some rando is stalking you, then that's a matter for the police. And going on social media to directly threaten to put them in the fucking ground would be immediate grounds in itself for disassociation from the BBC and at least a bloody statement issued condemning the post. And look, again, I find cancel culture totally disgusting. But when we're in a situation where someone like John Cleese gets pilloried for pointing out that London ain't really English anymore and basically just commenting on official census data and also just using his fucking eyes, I can't really help but laugh. Especially when we've seen countless other examples of left-wing comedians in recent years be completely insulated by the nonce covering BBC after they themselves have spewed bile and hatred toward the white gammons and naughty Caucasians that make up the majority of the country and that, checks notes, also fucking fund them. I mean, it was hilarious, wasn't it? When Joe Brand went on BBC Radio 4 and joked about throwing battery acid in Nigel Farage's face at one time. Because that's just banter, bro. And he's totally fair game, given he's one of them white gammony blokes what totally loves his country, and thinks maybe letting in infinity immigrants every year probably ain't sustainable in a serious country what was once a globe-trotting empire and stuff. And clearly Ofcom agreed, considering, quote, the audience's likely expectation of Joe Brand's style that challenges accepted views in society through provocative comedy. Though they clearly didn't consider the same expectation of style when it came to outspoken provocateur and based AF Lawrence Fox, joking about not wanting to shag that misandrist bird on GB News last year, and which promptly led to the sacking of pale male and stale Aussie Dan Wootton for not pushing back enough on what was a clear and obvious joke. So it would seem to me that the protective umbrella of provocative comedy is only limited to those of a liberal mindset these days. Equally hilarious was when that stunning and brave chocolate comedian Sophie Duker went on Frankie Boyle's show and supposedly joked about wanting to kill Whitey, and then doubled down by saying the quiet part out loud via another supposed joke. That no, seriously, she totally wants to kill Whitey and stuff.
When we say we want to kill Whitey, we don't really mean we want to kill Whitey, we do. But when we say we want to kill Whitey, it's like it's a capitalist, not today.
You're gonna finish the show.
But it's an obvious joke, bro, so who cares, right? Well, certainly not the Beeb, who officially dismissed over 1,300 complaints, given it was clearly a bit of a gag and we have to take everything all minorities say in the best faith possible, whilst any mildly risque comment made by a middle-aged whitey has to be taken at their worst and naturally assume that they just want to go on a rampage to exterminate anyone with too much of a suntan. Well, I assume that's the case, given the BBC hilariously declined to discuss the reasons for the dismissal and decision to stick two fingers up to the British people who paid to be propagandised with this Marxist drivel and thinly disguised contemptuous death threats being direct to their living room.
Nice.
Anyway, not really sure why I'm surprised when this is the same institution that covered up nonsense in every cultural crevice, promoted and knelt to an insurrectionary force that destroyed and dismantled our cultural legacies, and literally makes programmes ranting about how everything in England is fucking racist, including the goddamn countryside. I mean, it's not like Auntie Beeb is now a morally degenerate shell of its former self, pushing an unhinged liberal agenda and using the hollow husk of its most iconic and beloved franchises as a skin suit to promote the virtues of debauchery, mental illness and flat-out weapons-grade cringe.
Meep. Yes, the meep. I promise I can help him get home and then you'll never see me again.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes, sorry, good point. Are you he or she
Or they?
My chosen pronoun is the definite article. I am always the meep.
Oh, I do that.
No!
And I just don't get why the Beeb are suddenly so corrupt nowadays. Because I was told that they'd never do a bunch of bad things like competition rigging and using bad faith and deception to inveigle their way into the royal circle in order to convince the nation's princess to do an inflammatory tell-all interview, and which very likely resulted in her assassination by a fat-fingered eco-loon. Totally accidental motor vehicle crash had absolutely nothing at all to do with His Royal Highness, aka the King of England, and peace be upon him and shit. But anyway, although Dane Baptiste has finally issued an apology, it's good to know that you can make active death threats at the BBC now with zero practical consequence. And as it stands, only 2 of his BBC colleagues have come out to condemn his words, and they're 2 Jewish guys on the other side of the war. But let's face it, at current day BBC, this guy will probably be given his own primetime show off the back of all this, and then even be given an MBE from the Crown, given these people seem to hate the Jews and run endless coverage of pro-Palestine marches, yet showed fuck all the freedom marches during COVID, and also continually present any kind of patriotic protest as a bunch of far-right mob of thugs will just want to provoke the plot and bonk innocent horses on the head because reasons. But whatevs. I for one wish Mr. Baptiste all the best in his future career as a shining star of Auntie Beeb, because he clearly represents the new liberal values of the institution going forward. Because the sheer fact that he felt comfortable and protected enough in the current cultural climate to openly post something so inflammatory quite says it all, really. What kind of Caucasian comedian would ever dare post such a thing and expect to work for the BBC ever again? This fella clearly wasn't bothered about the long-lasting implications for his career. Well, I sure as heck shan't be holding my breath for the BBC to hold a raging leftist to account, because the last Baptiste to get cancelled on the BBC was that miserable French fella who loved doing a bit of detecting. But he was a middle-aged white man, so that was pretty inevitable, really. R.I.P. Julian.